Good morning from beautiful Tempe, Arizona. I'm here today with a brand new Lucid Gravity Grand Touring, topping her off an Electrify America DC fast charger, and I'm about to begin a 70-mile-an-hour highway range test with this vehicle. Now, if you follow me here on State of Charge, you may have seen about a month and a half ago, I posted a Lucid Gravity Grand Touring 70-mile-an-hour highway range test that I did in New Jersey where I live. However, when I finished the range test and talked to Lucid, they checked the diagnostics of the vehicle at the time, and they said the vehicle had a problem with its rear drive unit while I was doing the range test, and they didn't feel that the results were truly representative of what the Gravity can do. So I agreed to retest the Gravity Grand Touring. The problem is, over the past 5 or 6 weeks, it's gotten very cold in New Jersey. It's like 12 degrees today there. So it really wouldn't have been fair to test the Gravity in such cold conditions. No electric vehicles go as far as they do when it's warm, when it's cold. And that's not saying that it's not valuable information to do cold weather range tests. In fact, I plan on doing a cold weather range test with the Gravity at some point, maybe in January or so. But to get a baseline, a fair weather range test, I needed to go somewhere where it was warmer. And Lucid mentioned that I could come out to Arizona. Their factory in Casa Grande is not too far from here. And I could do it on the same course that I did a Lucid Air range test on a few years back. It basically circles Phoenix, and typically you can maintain 70 miles an hour. Traffic doesn't get too bad. So I'm actually gonna wait until morning rush hour is over and then hop out right when I think the coast is clear. I've been monitoring Google Maps to see when there's slowdowns and so forth. But that's the plan here today. This is Lucid Gravity Grand Touring 70-mile-an-hour highway range test, part 2. Let's get into it. All right, so out here in Arizona, actually starting in Tempe, driving in these loops around the city center of Phoenix on highways around Phoenix, the same route that I took when I did the Lucid Air range test a few years ago. And as I mentioned, I'm redoing the Lucid Gravity Grand Touring. This is the Grand Touring, the big battery. The battery has about 123 kilowatt hour of usable capacity. If you remember my last range test, I was only able to access 115 kilowatt hour. Now I know Lucid, on the Air at least, had a nice low-end buffer, and from what I understand, they also have one on the Gravity, maybe about 5 to 6 kilowatt hours. So on this test today, I think I'm going to push it a little bit beyond zero and go a little bit farther and eat up some of that low-end battery just to see really how well the vehicle can do. On my last range test, I ended up with only 345 miles, and the vehicle has an EPA combined range rating of 450 miles, so that was super disappointing. But the weather was not good. It was cold. I did it overnight. It dipped down into the 40s. And also we had 10-mile-an-hour winds. And that's enough to really shave some miles off a range test. In addition, when I was done with the range test, Lucid told me that there was a problem with the rear drive unit. They actually came and took the vehicle back from me the next day, even though I was supposed to have it for 4 more days, I think, on that loan. Because they needed to change the rear drive unit. So it was significant enough that they took the vehicle back from me. In any event, I wanted to do it over and get a clean range test, and it's too cold in New Jersey right now to do that. So we arranged this out here. They had one of their fleet management companies drop this car for me at the airport last night. They charged it up all the way. So when I got to my hotel, the car's still at like 95%. So this morning, I wasn't able to do a full deep DC fast charge to warm the battery up, which I usually do when I do these range tests. And it was cold here last night. It was in the high 30s overnight. So the car cold soaked in a cold parking lot overnight. Not making excuses. I'm just telling you what we have here. We're starting out with a cold battery pack, but it is going to warm up. It's already in the 50s. It was in the high 40s when I did that when I charged the vehicle at the Electrify America charging station, but now it's already up into the 50s. It's going to get into the high 60s, so it's going to warm up. I suspect it's possible that the range in each quarter of this range test might increase as the battery warms up, but we'll see. So I did everything with this vehicle as I do with all my vehicles to set them up for range tests. The tires are set to the right tire pressure. This has the staggered 20-inch wheels on front, 21-inch wheels on back with the Aero wheel covers, the same wheel setup that I did with the first Grand Touring. That's the setup for the greatest range. Lucid sells larger size wheel packages and you get less range. If you want the most range, get the standard 20-inch on front, 21-inch on back. All their wheel packages are staggered. The front wheel is always an inch smaller than the rear wheel. So I set the tire pressure correctly, and luckily I checked it. I always check it, but the fleet management system had the tire pressure way out of whack, and I always ask to please make sure it's set properly because I'm going to do a range test. And I got the car and it was way off. Luckily there was a Circle K close to my hotel, and I was able to set it perfectly to 42 PSI on all 4 tires, so the tire pressure is good. We set the Dream Drive at 71 miles an hour because that's a true 70 miles an hour. I've driven the Gravity enough to know that it's 1 mile an hour off. We have the drive setting in smooth. We have the suspension set down to low. So everything's set up, good to go. I have the climate control set to 71 degrees and on fan setting 2. I might play with that during the range. So if it starts getting warmer later, I might drop it down a little bit. I have the rear climate control turned off, and I double checked. I made sure I turned it off because Lucid told me when I did the first range test, when they checked all the data, they said it was running during the range test, and I know I turned it off. I think there was like phantom bug with the car or something that turned it on, but in any event, it's off for this range test for sure, and I'll check it during the range test so it doesn't turn itself back on automatically, and we're good to go. So 345 was the first range test. Let's see what happens when we do it with a different vehicle in warmer climate in better conditions. You know, I'm not rooting for it to do good or do bad. I just do the range tests and let the range fall where it does. But we'll check in when we're at 75% state of charge and 1/4 of the range test is up. State of Charge is powered by Qmerit, North America's premier installer of electric vehicle charging equipment. After I've helped you decide which charger to buy, follow the link in the description of my videos and have Qmerit install it. And if you do follow that link, Qmerit will waive the $150 installation deposit. But this is an exclusive offer for State of Charge followers. So in order to get that offer, you must follow the link in the description of my videos. All right, checking in at 75% state of charge, and we have gone 92.1 miles. That's 3 miles farther than I went on the first 25% of my first range test. Not enough to really say that's any significant difference, but I will point out a couple of things. Number one, the first quarter of my first range test, we drove the farthest of any of the quarters because as the night progressed, it was getting colder. I think the battery was getting colder, and that was the best quarter of the range test. I almost think the opposite's going to happen here. I think we're going to do better as the day goes on because it's warming up. It's already 58 degrees now. So it's already more than 10 degrees warmer than when I was charging the car up at the Electrify America charging station. And it's going to get a lot warmer. It's going to get, I think, another 10 degrees up to 68. So I think that's going to help us here. There's like no wind too. So that's good. It's like 2 miles an hour wind. So that's negligible. We've used 28.2 kilowatt hour and we have a consumption rate of 3.26 miles per kilowatt hour, which is better than what I had in the first range test. So we're starting off on a good foot. But if you watch my range tests, things can change quickly. The one thing that hasn't changed is the traffic has been awesome. I'm locked in at 70 miles an hour, just cruising. Matter of fact, let me get over because I might be holding somebody up. And there's not even a lot of traffic, so I'm not worried about changing lanes much. I pretty much lock it in and drive for a long time. The only thing I have to make sure is that I don't miss an exit, because unlike the New Jersey Turnpike, when I do these range tests and I just drive way down and up, back and forth, and I know everything, here there's at four times I have to make turns in order to get around the Phoenix area, and I'm not familiar with these roads, so I have to really pay attention or I'm going to end up where I don't want to be. But other than that, everything's starting off great. We will check back when we are at 50% state of charge. All right, at 50% state of charge, half of the range test is over, and as I thought, we did better in this quarter than we did in the first quarter. We went 97.7 miles. So we're sitting at 189.8 miles now with a consumption rate of 3.28 miles per kilowatt hour. And in that section, we used 29.5 kilowatt hour. So we are at a total of 57.7 kilowatt hour used after 50% of the range test. That would take us right to about where I was with the first range test, because that's about 115 kilowatt hour, which I think is pretty much, when you drain the gravity down to zero, it's at about 115 kilowatt hour, and then you've got 5 or 6 more kilowatt hour in that lower end buffer, get you up a little bit over 120 kilowatt hour. Now Lucid says there's a 123 kilowatt hour usable, but you know, that number's also not an exact number. You can pull different amounts of kilowatt hour out of your pack depending on the situation, how much you stress the battery, the temperature of the battery pack. So that's kind of a moving number, that 123. But in this range test, I'm definitely going to push it beyond 115 kilowatt hour for sure. I'm going to get close to 120 kilowatt hour. At least that's my goal. The whole tricky thing is when I get to the end, because I don't know the area, I don't really know how well I can go beyond my final stop and then turn around and come back. I'm going to be playing with Google Maps a little bit once I get down to the very end to see exactly where I can go to make it back to the Electrify America charger. And at that point, I have to just charge up and then head to the airport because I'm flying home today. This was a quick in and out job. But so far, so good. We are tracking, 380, which is better than we did the first time, 345. So, if we can get over 375, I think it's pretty good. I don't think the gravity's going to do, and let me get around this truck because now I'm down to 68 miles an hour. I don't think the gravity is going to do 400 miles at 70 miles an hour, as I really initially hoped it would, because it has the 450 mile EPA combined range rating. I thought I might be able to squeeze more than 400 miles at 70 miles an hour. Now that we're redoing it here and I'm halfway and we're still short, I don't think the gravity is a true 400 mile highway driver. I think we'll see what happens with the rest of this test, but I think, you're looking at 350 to 380, somewhere in there, at 70 miles an hour. Of course, if we go faster, you're not going to go that far. If you go slower, at 60 miles an hour, I'm sure I can get over 400 miles out of this, but very few people drive at 60 miles an hour on the highway. So, all right, I will continue and check in when we're at 25% state of charge in another, hour and 15 minutes. See you then. All right, so I'm at the final check-in before we finish the range test, and we had a killer third quarter, 101.2 miles driven. So now I'm sitting at 291 miles driven with 25% of the battery left. So we are going to actually get close to 400 miles here today. We're not going to hit 400 miles, but we are going to get pretty close. I think we're going to be close to 390. It depends on how comfortable I am running that low end buffer down to as low as I can get it and still make it to the charger. I've already started doing some calculations. It's not as easy as I hoped it would be, but I think we'll be able to work it out to squeeze as much out of the battery as I can. And talking about squeezing out of the battery, so far the car's saying that we accessed 86.7 kilowatt hour, which means in that quarter of the range test, we used 29 kilowatt hour. So far for the first 3 quarters, I accessed 28.2 kilowatt hour, then 29.5 kilowatt hour, and then 29 kilowatt hour in this section. And our consumption rate now is up to 3.36 miles per kilowatt hour. So as I suspected when the range test started, we're getting more efficient as the day goes on because it's warming up. If you notice, I took my sweatshirt off. I don't know if I did it before the last check-in. I think I did. I think I took it off right before 50%. But now it's up to 67 degrees. So, you know, it's 20 degrees warmer than it was when I was charging the car. And, you know, that makes a difference. The battery's warming up and we're getting more efficient. So we're going to get close to 400 here today. It's going to be a good improvement over my first range test for sure. I mean, at least 35 to 40 miles better than the first range test we did. So, you know, I'm sure Lucid will be happy with those numbers. But as I said earlier, I don't do it to make anybody happy. I run the cars fairly and, you know, let the results go where it goes. And I did mention earlier, I still want to do a cold weather range test. And my friend Sip, who has a YouTube channel called Notch EV, it's a small channel, but check him out. He has a Lucid Gravity Grand Touring. He lives in New York, close to me. I think we're going to get together and do like a real cold weather range test, maybe a really frigid day in January, just so we could do the extremes, you know, good weather, and then this is what it'll do when it's really bad weather. I'm really not going to count that last range test that I did for a number of reasons. The wind was terrible, and also Lucid said that there was a problem with the rear drive unit, so I don't think that's fair to really count those results at all. So this will be my warm weather results test, and then we'll do the cold weather results once it gets even colder and Sip can accommodate with a car, and maybe we'll even do it together, but we'll see about that. All right, next check-in's going to be probably when I am doing my final drive to the charger, and we'll talk about you know, where we're at and my impressions. I mean, I've driven the Gravity now a lot. I just did I haven't posted this video yet, but I did a collaboration with Kyle Connor from Out of Spec Video. Kyle, Out of Spec Studios. Kyle does these insane road trip races for electric vehicles, and he's always invited me to go, but I could never make it. But I made this one. We did a race, seven passenger SUVs, electric SUVs, raced from the Canadian border in Fort Kent, Maine, down to Key West. It was over 2,000 miles. And the vehicle that I was in was a Lucid Gravity. So in this last month, I've probably spent more than 3,000 miles in the seat of a Lucid Gravity. So I've got a good feel for what I like and what I don't like about it. Overall, it's a really solid vehicle. I mean, drivetrain's fantastic. I love how this thing drives. It drives like a car. So Lucid still has some software things to work out, though. There's still some bugs in the car, and the key fob is terrible. Sometimes it doesn't connect. You press the brake to put it in drive, and it won't let you. You have to pick up the key fob and shake it. So that's something that's super annoying. It's only happened to me once today, but it happened to us a lot during the race. And I know people don't typically race their cars, but it cost us time. So that was a problem. And there's also some minor software glitches in the vehicle, although I've been pretty solid here today. The car that I had a month and a half ago in New Jersey had I was getting a lot of warnings and glitches, like, you know, sensors not working, headlights not working, and the headlights were on, so I knew they were working. But this car's been pretty solid, so maybe Lucid's pushing out some updates. I don't know. I really haven't had any issues with it here today, and it's performed really well. So, okay, see you on the final drive to the charger. Okay, we're at the bitter end. I am just about to pull off the highway. It's about 200-300 feet ahead, and remarkably, we've done what I said we weren't going to do. The Gravity went 400 miles at 70 miles an hour. Right now, it just turned 401 miles. So every single leg, the vehicle went farther. And let me make sure I know where I'm going here. I got to turn a right at the light here. The temperature consistently warmed up. We're at 72 degrees now. And that made such a huge difference. Now, I know all electric vehicles get affected by the cold weather, but I test a lot of EVs, and you know, usually when it's only 20, 30 degrees colder, it makes an effect, but not as much. It seems like the Gravity might be super sensitive to temperature, because huge difference. Even today, I saw the difference from this morning to the afternoon. We're going to average like 3.43 miles per kilowatt hour, and we were averaging like 3.26. I got to get over here. I got to get way over. I'm like doing a 4-lane shift. I don't like doing that, but anyway. And there's more in the tank. We hit zero about 4 miles ago. I know, and Lucid has told me, and my buddy Kyle has even tested this, that the Gravity has 5 to 6 kilowatt hours available at the lower end buffer once you get down to zero. And I've probably only used like 2 kilowatt hour at the most at the end. So I know it even has another 15, 16 miles left in it. But my flight is like in an hour and 10 minutes. I think I just got the notification that boarding starts in 40 minutes. And I've got to get here, charge the car up enough to get back to the airport, drop it off where the drop-off is, take the bus to the terminal, go through security, and get on my flight. I might not be flying home tonight on my flight that I'm supposed to. So otherwise, I probably would have just driven it around a little bit more and drained it a little more. But still, we are going to end up with more than 400 miles, which is a huge win. And plus, I don't drive the cars till they die like Kyle does. Kyle from Out of Spec. I usually end my range test at zero, or I'll drive a little bit lower than zero. And I figure that that's good for me. You know, most people aren't going to drive their car till it stops. So this is fine. I probably did 4 or 5 miles after it hit zero, which is acceptable for me. I'm pulling into the Electrify America charger. It looks like there's a charger available, a couple chargers available. How do I want to do this now? My charge port's in the back left, and I do have a NAX adapter. I think I know which one I'm going to go to. I'd like to pull straight in. Oops, that's not good. Is this charger is not available? No, I think it is. That one is available. So let me pull. Actually, I'll pull straight into this one because it'll be on the right side. Somebody just beat me to the spot that I was going to pull into. These are super tight spots here at this location here. Let me make sure it's working. Yeah. When I came in last night, one of them wasn't working. I thought it was this one. Maybe EA got it up. Okay, here we go. Park. Let me take some pictures. The final stats. Okay. And then we'll go over everything. But first I'm going to plug it in because I need to get charging. And then we'll talk about the range test after I plug in. Okay, final stats here. Then also our energy usage stats. Let's take a look at this. Here, okay, 401.3 miles, and it says total battery consumed 99.8%, but we'll look at that in a minute. And then here's all the individual stats, which I'll show in a second. Okay, I got that. Now I'm going to run out real quick and plug in, and then I'll come back in and we'll talk about the recap. My handy NAX adapter. All right, we are charging. Plug and charge worked. Okay, so let me get this back up on me. My mic. Okay, so let's take a look at the final results. Actually, let me write it down on my chart here, and then we'll go over everything. So it was 401.7. We used 116.8 kilowatt hour. Remember, in my first range test, we used 115. And now I accessed about 117, but there's a solid 120. So that we could have gone another 15 miles, I'm sure, here today. And our final consumption is 3.43 miles per kilowatt hour, and the temperature is 72 degrees. Okay, so now let's take a look at the whole range test in review and compare it to the numbers that I had on my first range test. So in the first quarter of this range test, I went 92.1 miles. On my first range test, I went 89.1 miles. On this range test, I used 28.2 kilowatt hour, and on the first range test, 28.3 kilowatt hour. I was averaging 3.26 miles per kilowatt hour here today, as opposed to 3.14 when I did the other range test. Okay, at 50% state of charge, I drove 97.7 miles here today in that quarter and 84 miles on my first test. So I was at 189.8 miles after 50% of the battery was used, as opposed to 173.1 miles on my first test. I used 29.5 kilowatt hour in that segment as opposed to 29.2. So my total usage was 57.7 as opposed to 57.5, almost identical after 50%. Today I was averaging 3.28 mile per kilowatt hour as opposed to 3.01. After 3/4 of the race, when I was at 25% state of charge, I drove 101.2 miles in that segment as opposed to 86.1. So I was sitting at 291 miles driven as opposed to 259.2. That's where I really put some separation. I used 29 kilowatt hour and 29.2 in the first test. And take a look at the total kilowatt hour used after driving 75% of the tests. Both tests were the same, 86.7 kilowatt hour used. I was averaging 3.36 miles per kilowatt hour here today, as opposed to 2.98 in the first test. Okay, final results. In the final leg, I drove 110.7 miles. Take a look at that. In every single leg, I drove more. I was expecting to do that, and I even mentioned it early in the video. I thought as it warmed up, I was going to start going farther, and I did. And on my first test, I went 85.8 miles. You see, on that first test, I went the farthest the first quarter because it was warmer. It got colder as the range test went on because I did it overnight. So that hurt the consumption rate. So my total miles, I finished up here today 401.7 as opposed to 345. I used 30.1 kilowatt hour in that final segment as opposed to 28.2. I finished up using 116.8 kilowatt hour. I used 115 exactly on the first test. And on this test here, we averaged 3.43 miles per kilowatt hour. And I finished up the first test with just a 3.0 mile per kilowatt hour average. Now let's look at where the energy went in this range test. You can see the vehicle is showing that I drove 401.3 miles and used 99.8% of the battery. I'm not really sure how it calculates the lower end buffer below zero, because this car should have about 3 to 4 kilowatt hours still available. Now let's take a look at the usage breakdown. 96% of the battery went to driving. I lost 2.9% because of the elevation change along the route. This route is pretty flat, but there is some elevation change, and it's not nearly as flat as the route I use when I do these range tests back in New Jersey. The lights and cameras used 0.4%, the infotainment system used 0.3%, and the climate control needed only 0.2% of the overall energy consumed during this range test. Now, in the first test, I did end with 1% state of charge and 3 miles of estimated remaining range. I didn't do that today. I blew by zero and kept driving. So we were at 0% state of charge and 0 remaining miles for the last 4 or 5 miles, I'd say, about that. So yeah, I used more of the battery and we were more efficient here. I'm surprised at how much more efficient the vehicle is just with a 20-degree difference. That's a huge difference. I bet if it was in the 70s all day today, like it was here today, if I didn't start out in the 40s and it was 70 degrees all day, I probably would have done like 425. So, you know, I'd been kind of hitting the Gravity on its range since the first test, saying, you know, I don't know how it got a 450 mile EPA range rating. Now I know how it did. In perfect condition at driving at 75, 80 degrees, I bet you this will go 425 miles to dead at 70 miles an hour. Now, I know the EPA range rating isn't a 70 mile an hour test. They do a different type of cycle, and there's even 2 different ways of doing it. And the EPA range rating isn't really the best metric to judge what a vehicle's range is going to be. So many of these vehicles we test do better than their EPA range rating, and then others don't do as well, like what's happening here today. But still, 400 miles at 70 miles an hour, I don't know how anybody could complain about that. There's you know, you can count the EVs on one hand that can do that out of all of the electric vehicles out there today. And the Gravity is a 7-passenger SUV. Now this is configured for 5 passengers, and that adds a little bit of range. I think the 7-passenger one has like a 13-mile range penalty. So this is a 5-seat with the 20-inch and 21-inch aero wheels. This is the perfect configuration for the longest range Gravity that you can get. But you can configure this with 7 seats, and you get like a 13-mile range penalty, which that's 13-mile EPA. It might not translate to 13 miles on a 70-mile-an-hour range test like this. It might have cost me like 7 or 8 miles, who knows. But in any event, this really rocked. I'm super happy that I was able to come out and redo this test. I don't know if that faulty rear drive unit contributed to the poor performance on my first test, or if it was just the fact that it was much colder and we had a 10-mile-an-hour wind for the whole range test. I don't like doing range tests with wind more than like 7 or 8 miles an hour because it really affects the range test. I mean, if you have a 10-mile-an-hour headwind, it's like you're driving 10 miles an hour faster. So, you know, it really throws off the range test. But that was when I had the car, so I was hoping the wind would die off as the range test went on. But here today, we had almost no wind, great weather, and the Gravity performed exceptionally. So I'm satisfied with it. I think Lucid's going to be happy when they find out about the results. I think this is the first time somebody did a range test with the Lucid Gravity that it exceeded 400 miles at a constant highway speed. So, you know, it can do it for sure. I would be comfortable driving this, you know, at highway speed, 70, 75 miles an hour if I had to go 325, 350 miles. You know, most people are going to drive a little faster than 70 miles an hour on the highway. But it's an efficient vehicle considering what it is, the size of it, the shape of it. You know, it's like a big toaster going down the road. No matter what they do with the aero, it's still a big box. I mean, the CDA is still going to be what it is. There's not a lot that you can do with that when you have this big, you know, toaster going down the road. I know there's a lot of little things they can do with the aero, but the area of the front of the vehicle is the area of the front of the vehicle. So, all right, well, that's pretty much all we have here today. I'm already at 20% state of charge. This thing rips. I mean, and I'm probably sharing power here. Yeah, I'm only taking in 178 kilowatt now, but if nobody was sharing power here, you know, we'd be ripping along at 300 kilowatt or higher at this point. The Gravity can pull 400 kilowatt. These stations can't deliver 400 kilowatt, but there are stations out there that can, and I've even tested it, and this thing will rip charging. It's one of the best top 2 or 3 charging electric vehicles you can get today. So, all right, well, I'm going to unplug now and head to the highway. I'm glad that I flew out here and did this. I'm happy to get a decent result. I was hoping I didn't come out and do all this and then end up with like 6 miles more than what I did at home. This proved that you know, there was something going on that first time, whether it was mechanical or the fact that it was so cold and the wind was hurting it. But that's not representative of a proper Gravity range test at 70 miles an hour. I believe today's more representative of what you should expect in this weather. So, all right, that's all I have here today. If this is your first time here at State of Charge, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss any upcoming electric vehicle news and reviews. And as always, thanks for watching.